Hey boy, so after getting hit with non-stop injuries, especially, in our last game against Liverpool, we've actually got some good news to get into. So let's have a look here, right? So Kieran Gill put out a couple hours ago. Cole Palmer's return is expected within weeks, not days, not months, but weeks. After Chelsea diagnosed a strained groin, which requires no surgery. More details on the hoped timeline and recovery in story below. And obviously, we've got here, right? No surgery required. Will return within weeks, not months. And I did see this is why there's no point speculating, right, until we get some actual news coming out. I did see this a couple hours ago when I was in the gym, right, just scrolling through Twitter. And Cole Palmer, he was pictured in Dubai. A few people took pictures with him, right? And they were saying, oh, Cole Palmer's in Dubai. That means he's seen a specialist. He's absolutely, definitely getting surgery, right? And lo and behold, a couple hours later, we get this update here, and he'll be back actually sooner. He'll be back in a couple of weeks rather than months, and he won't need surgery. So look, it just goes to show, don't believe people who are speculating. There's no point speculating until we get concrete, reports from, trusted journalists that we can believe, or the club does a debrief or something like this. Otherwise, what's the point? Everyone was getting so worked up over this, saying, you know, Cole Palmer's allowed to take a couple of weeks off, and he's been spotted in Dubai in the summer as well. So it's somewhere he clearly likes to go to just maybe relax, especially if he's got a couple of weeks resting with his injury. But it doesn't necessarily mean he's there and he's seeing a specialist, and this absolutely means he's getting surgery, right? Like, that's just not the case. So, look, this is great news. How long is within weeks, is open to interpretation, right? He, he's probably not going to be back for the Forest game, but it's looking like he should be probably match fit and maybe start against Barcelona later in November. So that's the sort of time frame I'm looking at. I'd probably say, let's not rush him in October. Let's maybe ease him back in, give him a cameo off the bench or something like that. But maybe late October, early November seems somewhat realistic. And look, it's great with the international break. He can just completely rest now. There's not big training sessions going on. He's not pushing himself to come back to get back to the games, right? So this is great news. Hopefully he's back soon. And we can just have a look at our next couple fixtures anyway, right? So Forest away in 10 days from now. So Saturday, the 18th. This is a game, we should be winning comfortably without Palmer. You can just look at Forest's form, right? I mean, it's really bad. Look here. So like they haven't won a game since August 17th. Since Ange has taken over, they haven't won a single game. Doesn't look like Ange is going to be sacked. So we should be quite ruthless. We should be going into this game with the mentality of let's go and get Ange sacked. I think if he loses this, he will be gone. The run they've been on, they haven't won a single game. You'd expect some kind of new manager bounce, right? And they just haven't had that. So this is a game we absolutely should win, and we don't need to push Palmer back for this. Then we play Ajax on the 22nd. João Pedro has his red card, so he can't feature in here. Palmer, I suspect, again won't feature. So I think we win this game without them anyway. Ajax on a very strong team. We shouldn't have to worry about that either. Sunderland at home. Now this could be a little tricky. Sunderland, they got a decent team. They're in good form. But United just beat them. I think if we were away from home, I'd looked at this fixture with a bit more, stress, and maybe we go away with a draw. But I think at home, we should be winning this. And for me, the sort of when I'd look to maybe get Palmer back is probably for that Spurs game, November 1st. It's about 3 weeks from now, maybe a bit longer than that. So maybe I'd look for Palmer to come back here. Again, Karabag, he shouldn't even travel with the squad for that one. Wolves at home, we don't necessarily need him, right? Burnley away, we don't. The biggest game is November 25th. And by that report here, right, he should be within weeks. November 25th, it is quite a long way away from now, to be honest. It's about 6-7 weeks, right? So I imagine he'll be back for then. And if you look at our previous fixtures, these are all games we should be winning without Palmer. We shouldn't need to rush him back for them either. So I'm looking quite hopeful in that respect. Don't think we need to push him and force him to come back. Let's just say from these next couple fixtures, right? This should be a win. 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 You know, away to Tottenham. Yes, historically, we've always beat them, right? But again, it is on paper a tough game. You could understand if we go there and get a draw. We should win this. We should win this. And we should win this. So our next really hard game, you'd have to say, is Barcelona. Don't really count Spurs. You know, they haven't looked totally convincing yet under Thomas Frank as well. You know, I think he's still trying to figure out his strongest 11. You know, but it's a derby game. It's away from home, so it will be a big game. It will be tough, but I don't really see us struggling, to be honest, especially how we've approached these big games, especially coming off this Liverpool win as well. So look, we have an opportunity here to really put a good sort of, you know, fixture run together. And I'm just hoping, let's not be charity FC. Let's not be, you know, nice to Ange and give him his first win. Like in previous years, this is how we sort of lined up, right? And I've been charity FC. One team's a week or a player hasn't scored for a long time. It's normally Chelsea, you know, us, that go ahead and give them their first win, give them a bounce. So I want us to be ruthless. Let's go out there and say, you know what, Ange, we're coming to get you sacked. You know, it sounds harsh, but I think we need to be a top football institution. This is how we should be operating, right? And some more, also we got some more injury updates, right? So Josh Acheampong trained with England under 21s yesterday ahead of fixtures with Moldova and Andorra. 19-year-old Chelsea defender limped off in the win versus Liverpool on Saturday. So, you know, this is great news. In the game, I did think it was precautionary, right? I didn't think he looked like, you know, a serious injury. I think just because due to the nature of the game, we're playing against Liverpool. If it was, say, Wolves, Burnley, teams like these, right? I think maybe he stays on. But because, you know, he had a slight niggle, they took him off, and we did have, you know, Joel Hatto to come on, etc. So I think it was more precautionary rather than he is actually injured, which is great news because I think, you know, he should be starting over Chalobah. To be honest, I really liked his performance. I think most Chelsea fans enjoyed his performance, and we want to see him play more. And especially, you know, these games are somewhat easier on paper, right? It means he has a chance to maybe get a few games started and position himself into the team, right? So this is good news. Hopefully he's fully fit for Forest. Whether he'll play or not, you know, we'll have to see closer to the match day. And then also, lastly as well, so Reece James is expected to be fully recovered in next days and be available straight away after international break. Good news for Chelsea. Obviously, I think he was quite smart. I think he pulled out. Yes, he had a sort of cut he sustained from the Liverpool game, right? Certainly not, you know, a proper injury. I think he did that because he wants to be fully rested to go again with Chelsea. We saw the last time he went with England, he was playing 90 minutes at wing back as well, so it was quite taxing on him. And especially in these useless games, we don't need Reece James playing wing back for 90 minutes for England. You know, all that travelling, all that, you know, accumulating all that fatigue. We just don't need that, right? So it's great he's staying at home. We got quite a lot of players who didn't travel, you know, had slight injuries, but they probably weren't injuries. They're just sort of being quite, you know, tactical in that sense. So, look, we got a while into our next game. It doesn't feel that long ago. We had an international break, and we've got another one. So, you know, the news is quite slow at the moment. Nothing's really happening. And I can't do a match preview for the Forest game, right? Because we're 10 days away. So I'll make that video about Thursday, Friday next week, you know, when we're much closer to the kickoff and we can maybe understand who's going to start, right? But, you know, just look at our list of injuries here. So Josh Acheampong, he should be back. Reece James should be back. Tosin should be back. Fofana will be back because he undergoed, you know, the concussion. So he was out for 3 games, but he should be fine now. Badger Shield should be back. It looks like the only players who will be out will be Santos, obviously Colwell, Delap, and Palmer. So, you know, the sort of injury drama that we did have, but all in all, it looks like they will be recovered in time for our next couple games, right? So, which is great news. And these games are really important. We definitely have to win them. You know, it's a bit early to sort of think, you know, what sort of lineup we could go with, but I suspect it'll be something like, you know, Sanchez, Reece James. You know, it'll be either Tosin or Acheampong, I imagine. and then hopefully Badger Shields back. But if not, I think Joel Hatto certainly played well enough to start, right? And then Cucurella at left back. And then I'd like to see a pivot of Caicedo and Lavia. I think, Lavia, he's always fit for Liverpool, right? And he always looks really good against Liverpool. But again, he can't stay fit. But I'd like to see a pivot of Lavia and Caicedo. There's not many midfields in Europe that can compete with that, right? And then I'd like Estevao to start on the right. I'd like Enzo Fernandez to play as that sort of, advanced playmaker, sort of box crasher position. So we're almost playing like a 4-3-3, but he'll just be a bit higher up, not quite a 10, but just arriving late into the box. I think Garnacho warrants a start as well. I thought he played really well against Liverpool. Maybe if Ange decides he wants to play a high line, I can imagine Garnacho really giving him a tough time. And obviously, João Pedro up top. We don't really have anyone else. Maybe Mark Gay starts, but that's the sort of lineup I'm going with just off the top of my head. But we'll go into it more detail when we get closer to the game. But, for now, Paul Palmer is great news, isn't it? Look, he's not going to have surgery. He's not going to be out for months. And it just shows. Let's stop speculating. Let's wait to see the actual facts, right? And then we can go from there. So that's the video for today, boys. I'll do some like tier lists and things, I think, in the next couple of days, just because there's not much to cover. We don't have any games going on. I don't really want to watch England. I'm not a big fan of the friendlies. So I'm not going to cover any of that, to be honest. So I'll do some fun sort of videos, tier lists and whatnot until we get closer to the match day. And then I'll see you boys then. So peace.